The most famous number in retirement planning isn't a rule, it's a worst case. It came out of one study on one country's market data run by one man answering a question a client had asked him. His name is William Bengen. And Bengen doesn't use his own number anymore. He raised it. Think about what that means for a second. Take $1 million portfolio. 4% is $40,000 in the first year. The figure Bengen published in 2025 is $47,000. That's $7,000 a year, every year, for 30 years. That one version of the math says a retiree could have spent, and the other says they couldn't. Same portfolio, same person, same market history, different answer. Here's what makes this strange. Almost everyone has heard of the 4% rule. Very few people have ever heard where it came from, what it was actually measuring, or that its author moved the number. And Bengen isn't the only one who moved it. Morningstar publishes a figure every year, and theirs is lower than 4. A paper in the Journal of Pension, Economics and Finance ran the same test across 38 countries and came out at roughly half of 4. So by the end of this, you'll know which single unlucky retirement year the whole rule is built on, why its own author says it's too cautious, and why one group of researchers thinks it's still far too generous. Start in 1994. Bengen was a financial planner in Southern California. Before that, he was an aerospace engineer, MIT trained. A client asked him a simple question: how much can I take out each year without running out? Nobody had a real answer. The standard advice at the time was roughly whatever felt reasonable. So Bengen did what an engineer does. He got the data. American stock and bond returns going back to 1926, and he tested a retirement starting in every single year of it. He published the result in the Journal of Financial Planning in October 1994. The paper is called Determining Withdrawal Rates Using Historical Data. The number he reported wasn't 4, it was 4.15%. That's the first thing almost everyone gets wrong, and it's the smaller of the two. Here's the bigger one. The 4% is applied once. One time to the balance on the day the retirement starts. After that, Bengen's method raises the dollar amount by inflation each year and ignores what the portfolio is doing. So $1 million means $40,000 in year 1. If inflation runs 3%, year 2 is $41,200, not 4% of the new balance. The same paycheck adjusted for prices. That distinction sounds small, it's the whole rule. Taking 4% of whatever the balance happens to be that year is a completely different strategy. It can never run dry, because 4% of a shrinking number is a shrinking number. It also means the income falls when the market falls, which is exactly the year most people can least afford it. Bengen was solving for a stable paycheck. That constraint is what made the number so low. Now look closer at what he actually measured. Bengen wasn't asking what a normal retirement looks like. He was asking what the unluckiest possible retirement looks like. He called it SAFEMAX. The highest rate that still survived 30 years if you happened to retire on the worst day in the entire dataset. That worst day was in the mid-1960s. A poor stretch for stocks, followed immediately by the inflation of the 1970s. Rising prices and a flat market at the same time is the one combination that breaks a fixed withdrawal plan. Across roughly 400 historical starting points in his data, exactly one of them needed a rate that low. The average across all of them was about 7.1%. In the best starting years, the sustainable rate ran as high as 13. So the famous number doesn't describe the typical retiree, it describes the single most unfortunate one in a century of records. Which brings us back to Bengen raising it. In August 2025, Wiley published his book. The title is A Richer Retirement, Supercharging the 4% Rule to Spend More and Enjoy More. 272 pages, 31 years after the original paper. In it he puts SAFEMAX at 4.7%. Note what hasn't changed, it's still the worst case. He isn't saying the average retiree can take 4.7. He's saying his revised worst case is 4.7 and the average sits far above it. Speaking to CNBC in September 2025, he named inflation as retirees' greatest enemy. In a December interview, he said early retirees may be cheating themselves. That's an unusual thing for a researcher to do. He built the most quoted guardrail in personal finance, then spent his own retirement arguing it's set too tight. So what changed? Not the market history, the portfolio. The 1994 study used two things: large American company stocks and intermediate-term government bonds. That's it. In 1994, that was a perfectly normal portfolio to model. The revision spreads the money much wider. Large caps, mid caps, small caps, international stocks, bonds, and cash. Diversification does something specific to a worst case. It doesn't raise the average return by much. What it does is soften the worst single stretch, because the asset classes don't all fall apart in the same year. And the worst case is exactly what SAFEMAX measures. Improve the floor, and the whole number moves. There's a neat irony in that. The 4% rule was too conservative, not because Bengen was pessimistic, but because the portfolio he had to model in 1994 was less diversified than the ones people actually hold now. Now the other direction. Morningstar publishes research called The State of Retirement Income, and they rerun the number every year. Their base case for someone starting retirement in 2026 is 3.9%. Below 4, not above it. Their assumptions are different from Bengen's, and the differences matter. They model a portfolio holding between 30 and 50% in stocks, which is more cautious than his. They require a 90% probability of still having money left after 30 years, and they build in forward-looking market expectations rather than only historical returns. That last one is the real split. Bengen asks what has happened. Morningstar asks what's likely to happen next. Worth noting though, the same Morningstar research says a retiree willing to let their spending move up and down could start near 6%. Their own range runs from 3.9 to 6, which suggests the flexibility matters more than the number does. And then there's the study that makes both of those look generous. In 2025, the Journal of Pension Economics and Finance published a paper by Ayjan Anarkulova, Scott Sederberg, Michael O'Doherty, and Richard Sayas. The title is The Safe Withdrawal Rate, Evidence from a Broad Sample of Developed Markets. Their objection is simple, and it's hard to argue with. Every version of this rule is built on the United States, and the United States had the best performing stock market of the 20th century. Testing a retirement plan only against the winner isn't much of a stress test, so they rebuilt it using 38 developed countries. Their finding: a 65-year-old couple willing to accept a 5% chance of running out could withdraw 2.26% a year, roughly half of 4. Same question, wider sample, same century. There's one assumption sitting underneath every number in this video, and all of them share it. They assume spending stays flat in real terms for 30 years. David Blanchett tested that. His research describes what's now called the retirement spending smile. Real spending tends to fall by around 1% a year through retirement, then tick back up late as health costs rise. The shape is where the name comes from. High at the start, dipping through the middle, curving up at the end. His numbers. A household starting retirement spending $100,000 a year is down to about $74,000 in real terms by age 84. A 26% decline. Blanchett's conclusion is that assuming flat spending causes people to oversave by 10 to 20%. That's a finding about the model, not about any one person. Every rule in this video inherits it. So where does that leave the most quoted number in retirement planning? It leaves it as what it always was and almost never gets called. A floor measured against the worst year in one country's records by a man who has since said the floor is set too low. One commenter on another video about this put it better than the research did. 4% is a fear floor. The honest summary is that the experts don't agree, and the gap between them is enormous. Bengen says 4.7. Morningstar says 3.9 or near 6 for someone who can be flexible. A paper spanning 38 countries says 2.26. What every one of them agrees on is that the answer depends on the assumptions, and the assumptions are doing more work than the number is. If you've ever run these numbers yourself, I'm curious. Which figure did you start from, and where did you first hear it?